Entrepreneurs, you probably need to work on your mindset. It's probably the number one thing that all of us need to enhance our mental performance around our businesses, our workload, our work-life balance, growing our business. There's just so much that goes into it. So, in this episode, I am sitting down with Karina Baldwin, the owner of True Adventure Collective. She's a mental performance coach who is here to help you calm the F down. Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast, a podcast for everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. Every week, I am joined by successful guests in all different industries and stages of business who will share what their experience was like transitioning from employee to boss. This is a resource for you if you're wanting to start a business, go all in on your side hustle, get to the next level in your thriving business, or just hear what it's like taking the leap to becoming your own boss. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast production agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, Karina, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. I am so excited to be chatting with you today.
I'm so stoked to be here. I'm very excited to actually be a guest on the podcast.
I'm really excited for you to talk about what mental performance. How about you just talk about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm so stoked to be here. So my name is Karina Baldwin. I'm a mental performance coach. So what that means is I have a master's degree in performance psychology. So originally, I started working in the athlete world. I got into my grad school program because I was an ex-athlete and I really needed someone like me when I was a D1 athlete at the collegiate level to navigate my sport and the mental headspace side of things. We are different than therapists or psychologists or counselors because we look to the future. A lot of sports psychologists, a lot of mental performance coaches and like people in my field who have the performance psychology background, we focus on how to get from point A to point B rather than understanding why you are who you are, right? That's a psychologist's job. That's a therapist's job. That's a counselor's job to look at why you are, find the patterns that you are versus I can help you get to where you want to go and be the best version of you along that way. There are some things that we connect dots based on our past. Obviously, you're not the person you are without your past. So we use that as a tool, but our past doesn't define us. A lot of what therapists do is look back and this is why we are the way that we are, right? And they shed a lot of light on things versus what I do is I help you take what you're good at. And so I always tell my clients this, I take you from good to great, right? Like you were doing well. You wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't doing well. And I don't take on clients that aren't already doing well. I want you to be doing well on your own. And then I can take you to that next level by teaching you how to navigate your own brain and use it as a tool rather than letting your brain navigate your life. It's kind of like that saying of people who are the tail wags the dog rather than the dog wagging the tail, right? If you're letting life happen to, if you're letting your brain control you rather than you controlling your brain, then life is going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot more complicated, a lot more overwhelming, a lot more stressful versus you being the master of the ship, the one in charge, the one telling your brain, "Hey, we're going to let that limiting belief go. We're going to," and it's more than just a flip of the switch. As much as I would love to be magic pill, here are clients and now your confidence is fixed, right? I would love
Yeah.
to be able to do that with my clients, but it's a learned skill that we do, whether it's confidence, it's boundaries, it's navigating emotions, it's understanding logic, right? When do we bring in logic? When do we process our emotions? So that's what mental performance is. It's a very broad field. I compare myself a lot for people who have never experienced mental performance coaching. Just like athletes have sports psychologists, that's what I am for business owners, right? So the only difference between me and a sports psychologist is they have a clinical PhD, meaning they are a therapist. And so we have the same performance psychology training, we have the same certification process. They just wrote a dissertation and had a clinical program internship. So I work with
Very
business
cool.
owners that are stressed out and the emotions get the best of them and they struggle to set boundaries or they struggle to follow through with their goals. And I help you go from good to great and master your own mind about things.
I love that. And I'm excited to dive into exactly like how the audience can start doing some of these tools that you teach and how it can
Mhm.
really impact them. But how about let's start by hearing your journey from employee to boss. So, how did you decide that you were going to become a mental performance coach and then start coaching on it?
There's so many different points that are like checkpoints that I'm like, oh, this is like super valuable. I started like my whole start in the journey of studying and understanding mental performance coaching is actually before I knew this field existed. I was an
Mm.
athlete in college. I was recruited to the University of Louisville to row crew. And so I was a rower in college and I really struggled in my sport, not to perform, but to like enjoy my sport. Like I was good at my sport and I could do decently well without putting in a ton of effort, but I didn't love what I did. I showed up for practice every day and was like, "Ugh, this is a box I have to check. And the reason I have to be here is because they're paying for my schooling. And so I have to be here." And
Mm.
it was no longer no one wants to do something they don't want to do. And if I could go back, I probably would have left my sport a lot earlier than I did. Or if I had worked with someone like me that could have understood that like you can leave your sport and you can have another life outside of this identity that you built. But I was like so ingrained in me that like I am a D1 athlete. I am a driver. I am a pusher and a committed and like I'm gonna follow through and I'm gonna do all these things and they're paying for my schooling and I like don't know what I'm gonna do if I don't do this sport and all these I'm well known in the community on campus as being the athlete or a athlete. And to let go of that was really really hard, and to like transition out of sport was really really hard for me. I started to love my life a lot more by transitioning out of sport, but I didn't know why I struggled so hard in a sport that I once loved and in a sport that used to be my entire identity and that like brought me so much joy and I had so many great friends with. And so I really, really struggled with that. And then when it came time to apply for grad schools, started doing more and more research about different psychology fields because I knew I wanted to go in the psychology field. I just didn't know exactly what. And found out about sports psychology, applied to the sports psychology program at Florida State. I got in. It was a top 4 university within the sports psychology field. Like I am honestly to this day amazed that I got in. I was like, I wasn't anything special. I had like a 3.3 GPA. Like, you don't have to be, I don't know if my essay just blew them away or what it was. I never asked my professors because I was like, if I ask, they'll kick me out. It's just not a
Funny.
good mentality to have either. But I got in and I started working with athletes at Florida State. And I started to see massive changes within my athletes that I worked with. I helped an athlete who was in the exact same situation that I was in. She was a freshman and she fell out of love with her sport. And I, from the outside, was able to see that like she needed to quit. She needed to not be in the sport. She was developing a very unhealthy relationship with her sport, as I did when I was in her shoes. And it was very much a like, I have to be here. I have to show up. I'm being forced to be here. I have to do these things. But I needed to let her make this discovery on her own, right? Like, I couldn't just be like, you should quit. Good luck. So I helped her out with that. And we laid out, and it took almost the entire year of us working together for her to come to the realization that it was time for her to retire and it was time for her to leave her sport. And when she left, she thrived. She just
Mm.
went out into the world, and now she lives in Hawaii and she has like a sales job and she loves it. And I can tell that like her life is just so much more full and so much more. She started showing up on social media, like just so much brighter. And just her life just seems so much more full without her sport, which is like very abnormal for someone who's in my field to be like, what, you convince someone to like quit their sport and aren't you supposed to help them within their sport? I'm like, I'm putting them as a human first. Like, you are a human before, just like my business owners that I work with now, you are a human before you're a business owner. I would love for your business to thrive, but I care more that you are your best version of you. And if your business isn't the way to do that, then like F the business. It doesn't matter. Right. Like, and that goes for any identity. So I started to see like
Yeah.
massive changes within the athlete world. And then I got a job right out of grad school working for the US Army. I was mental performance coach for the soldiers that I was working with. And I worked with all kinds of incredible soldiers, from military police to, like, we worked with like dentists, we worked with infantrymen, we worked with like the translators who would come in, engineers. Like, I worked with all kinds of soldiers, like wide range from, frontline men to pilots to military police, all kinds. And I really struggled in that role, not because of the work I was doing, but because of the population I was working with. Soldiers were cool, but I was like, I just don't feel connected to them. I didn't have anything in common with them. I didn't love working those things with them. And then when I was required to always ask for PTO, and I was like, I'm limited with 13 days of time off a year. 13
Mm,
days. That's just over one
yeah.
a month. And even with the holidays that were added, I get 2 days off a month. 2 days. And like, that seems like, oh, that's not that bad. But think about like your week long vacation, that's half my PTO. And so I
Yeah.
was like, couldn't stomach constantly asking for PTO. And my family is on the East Coast and I lived on the West Coast. And I was like, even just going home for holidays, that's half my PTO. And that doesn't include like fun Karina time. Right. And so I started building my business. Back when I first started, it was called Karina's Yoga. And I only sold yoga retreats. And I was like, adventure and yoga retreats. And this is what I'm gonna make my money doing. And I started selling yoga retreats, and it did okay. Like, I was fine. I did fine. But a reason I did that is because I started to fall out of love with mental performance coaching because of the how I was showing up in my 9 to 5. And when I left that, I quit my job in 2022 as the mental performance coach for the US Army. And it wasn't until 2023 that I started working with business owners, and I did a business owner only retreat. It's in Baja, Mexico. I do it every year now. So March of 2025, I will be doing it, and again for the third year in a row. And when I started working with those business owners, I was like, oh, I'm coaching them. I'm using my background and I'm doing this all again. And I do love it. I just didn't love working with soldiers. And so I started
Mhm.
using it more and more. And then I started offering coaching services. And I started with one on one. And then I've transitioned to group coaching and the Summit Mentality program, which you're in, Haley. And I think it's so valuable and so helpful because, like, I personally love group coaching because you learn not just from the person who is coaching, but from everybody else in the room. I think it's so much more valuable than one on one coaching. Like, I really do. I've invested in both one on one and group coaching, and in a heartbeat, I'd pick group coaching every single time. So that's the, like, I don't know, big picture of how I got to where I am. Yeah, it's wild stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah. I love your story and how you got to finally where you're meant to be. And I do think the retreats are really cool, and I'm excited to go on ours. But just you're keeping with your values and keeping with what's keeping you excited. And one thing that you said earlier was when you were in your sport, you were like, I am an athlete, I am doing this. And recently we talked about in your program those how we think about ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think as business owners, and a lot of the audience are in their newer phases or maybe, wanting to up level in their business, it's really easy for that I am a business owner to take over the entire personality.
Mhm.
We see this even in, we're both in Seattle, you're in Tacoma. I see this all the time with people in tech and corporate, and they become their entire job becomes their life. And so it's not just business owners, right? This can
Mhm.
happen with a lot of jobs. But I do find with business owners,
It's another
this happens a lot. So,
massive, yeah.
how, and even in your first year when you're hustling, 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 how can we keep in mind that like we are a person and we should be loving our life, even though maybe, our job is a little bit hard sometimes.
Mhm. I would say, like, one of my big things that I tell all my business owners is, like, and this goes for any field. If you work for Amazon, if you are, like, tech or high achiever or an athlete, or you cannot be known for only one thing. The coolest thing about you cannot be one thing. You can't be the coolest thing about you can't be your job. You can not only have one identifier. You have to have
Mhm.
multiple, because if that one thing goes away, like, let's say, very extreme cases. Let's say something happens and you cannot do your business tomorrow. Who are you without your business? Who are you if you can't sell your product, sell your service? Who are you if you can't serve those people? And if you're like, oh, well, that will never happen, think about athletes who get into car accidents and they lose the ability to use their legs. Like, tragic, tragic stories. And if they had nothing other than their athletic career, imagine how hard their mentality is going to be. And I realize these are very extreme statements, but in order to not be all consumed by your business or all consumed by, whatever your identifiers are, I look at, even as a female and someone who wants to have kids in the future, I look at a lot of females who fall into the traditional role of, like, mother, and it becomes all
Mhm.
consuming. And if that is the only thing that you are known for, come when the kid's 18 or 22 or however old they are when they move out, then who are you? You have to relearn yourself, right? And, like, wouldn't it be so much more fun if you already knew who you were outside of your children? When your children go off to summer camp, you're not just, like, sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for them to come back. You're enjoying that week that they're gone, and you and your partner are going and doing incredible, amazing things. You go to Europe, or you do a staycation, and you, like, pick up a new hobby. You, like, do something other than your labels. If you are a business owner, don't get caught up in the fact that you're a business owner. You are a mom, you are a sister, you are a climber, you are a runner, you are a lifter, you are a friend. Like, you need more labels than just that one. It may be your biggest label, but you are more than just that, and you can kind of, like, hang your hat on other labels, right? And, like, kind of tie yourself and your identity to these other roles that you serve in your life. And it's so easy for us to get, like, caught up in the one thing. I was a
Mhm.
D1 athlete. I am a business owner. I am a mountaineer. I am a skier. But you can't tie everything in your life to one label. And it's so easy for us to do it, especially when it's our entire career. It's where our money comes from. It's where our happiness comes from. It's where we spend 40 hours a week, or, fill in however much time that you spend in your business on. But it's so easy to fall into that role, and we have to fight against it. We have to do other things. You can be the wine connoisseur of your friends and know everything about wine. You can be a tea connoisseur. Like, I don't know, like, you can pick anything. You don't have to go and, like, create a second business. You don't have to go and climb mountains. You don't have to, like, do crazy things. You can know the best farmers market to find the best bread at. You can be the one that everyone texts you and is like, "Hey, you know how to decorate your house and you're not an interior designer, right? You're, like, whatever it is your job is." And people are like, "Haley does great vibes. I'm going to call Haley up to help me do my new house," kind of thing.
Oh my
So
gosh, definitely don't do that. You cannot see the rest of my house. But no, I absolutely know what you mean, like, it is so important, and, for me, when I was first starting my business, I wasn't really giving myself time to do things that interested me
Yeah.
a ton because I was so focused, and I do appreciate the time it took me to hustle and get to where I am now, because 'cause I've been in business for 4.5 years, and, like,
Mhm.
yes, I wouldn't have been here without that, but that doesn't mean I should have pushed so hard and forgotten, like, It's like when you go through a breakup and then you're like, "Oh, what do I really like doing?" And it's like you sit at the park and have a picnic by yourself and you're like, "Wow, I haven't done this for the past year that I was dating this person," you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what your program reminded me of because it's not just business and it's not just life. It's like, how do they work together?
Yeah. I tell a lot of people that like my program, it teaches you how to be a better human. Business is just the avenue in
Mhm.
which we learn the skills. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like the idea of teaching young kids how sportsmanlike conduct, you know, like we want them to be a team player. Sports is just a really good way to teach them how to do that. You put them on little league soccer and they can learn how to pass the ball and share. And that translates to being a teammate at
Mhm.
Microsoft when they're 30 years old and they learn how to share and give somebody else responsibility versus a ball hog at 7 years old, right? Like once you learn how to share the ball at 7 years old, you can go run a business. And I mean, there's a lot of steps in between, but you have the basics of I can delegate, I can give somebody else responsibility and trust that they're going to score the goal, that they're going to get it in the net. And I'm going to trust that they have the ability to do that, whether it's employees, it's teammates, it's clients, right? Like we have to learn to trust other humans in
Mhm.
that they're going to fall like pay their invoice, that they're going to VA is going to follow through with all the things that they say they're going to do. A collaborator is going to hold up their end of the bargain, right? Like, we have to trust other people and the only way to do that is to like master our own brain behind those things, that we can trust the others and we can be on top of
Mhm.
our brain, that like it's not it's not an emotion based decision, it's a like logic based decision. And performance
Yeah.
coaching absolutely helps manage that, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And something that is really important here is, like, how important our thoughts are about what we're doing,
Yeah.
right? And so, can you talk to us about how thoughts impact our actions and kind of I know you teach the performance coaching model. Can you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that and how we can use it in our businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to like crash course performance coaching model,
Mhm.
just like conceptually talk through it. Your thoughts trigger an emotion. Your emotion is what fuels your actions, and your actions are what create your reality. So essentially, for like a layout, you know, grab a piece of paper, thought, and then next line emotion, next line action, next line result. And then this is how the results in your life are real. This is the like your thoughts are the reason that your life is the way that it is. And like for I do understand there's external circumstances that we're like born into things or like things happen to us, and like yeah, don't get me wrong, we want to like include that aspect as well, but your thoughts more often than not are the reason that you have the results that you have, or reasons that you have the success that you have, or the failures that you have. Like, and that's why flukes aren't real. Like you've created that success. There's no such thing as like a business fluke. Like you've done something in order to do it. You had a thought. And so like if anyone has ever given you money for your services, that is not a fluke. You did that on purpose. You just may not know what actions got you there. I don't want anyone to ever think that some result was a fluke ever. We can look for evidence. We can figure
Mhm.
out how to trail it back to like, oh, it was this moment, it was this action, it was these things that domino affected. But performance coaching model, our thought, emotion, action, result. Our thoughts trigger our emotion. Our thoughts are the reason that we feel a certain way, and our emotions are the gas in the tank. It's the fuel that gets us to do the actions that we do in our life. And the actions like domino onto creating the results that we have in our life. So if you have a 10K month, you can look back and use a performance coaching model and you work your way like top to bottom. If you're trying to look at what has already happened, if you're like 10K month, this is the result that I had. How did you get there? What were the thoughts that you were thinking? And this is when you evaluate, I always encourage you to like add a line of like what were the thoughts and the emotions that were fueling the evaluation, the KPIs. If you're looking at like last month, like what did you do in order to create the things that you had? What were the thoughts? What were the emotions? What were the actions that you did in order to create those results? And they'll start compounding, and they'll start to be a pattern that you'll be like, wow, every month that I was like, wow, I'm a
Yeah.
boss ass bitch. Then like, cool, you have this thought, then like, and that fueled a 10K month. You need to be like, I'm a boss ass bitch every single month. But then there's a month
Hmm.
that you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And then the next month is like a 3K month. And you're like, oh, I wonder why I was a 3K month. It's because I was thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So, like, creating that understanding and finding patterns in your own brain about like what is working, what is not working, what thoughts are triggering my emotions, what color of fuel am I putting in my tank, your emotion, right? What color of fuel are you putting in your tank? Is it, and it doesn't need to be this like toxic positivity of like, everything's great and I'm amazing, right? Like, it can start with things grounded in neutrality of, I can figure it out. I can figure it out sounds so
Hmm.
much better than I don't know what I'm doing. And it makes you feel
Yeah.
so much better to think, I can figure it out than I don't know what I'm doing. Because like the reality is like both those statements, you don't know the answer to the problem that's in front of you. But I don't know versus I can figure it out. One is action focused and the other one is like sitting in unknown, right? So
Yeah.
breaking down and understanding where are your patterns, where is your awareness, and how can you plan for your future. And the performance coaching model can also act as a quite literal to-do list, an instruction manual, an owner's manual for how to run a successful business. If you have received money from somebody in the past, look at how you landed that client and do it again and faster, right? We don't need to find people and reinvent the wheel every new client. If you sign a client from a networking group, go back to that networking group and have more conversations with people. Find a new networking group and have more conversations with more people. You found somebody on Instagram and you DMs them and welcome to your community, and then they booked a call with you. Start DMing people and being like, I'm going to do this again. Why? The second that you stop looking at the success of your past and evaluating your success of your past, that's when you're not going to succeed in your future, right? If you're just like, I have to reinvent the wheel, you're making life so much harder. Imagine if, like, these incredible people who run incredible businesses, what if after watching Amazon grow, Jeff Bezos was like, you know what, I want to invent something that's not Amazon. How much harder would that be than if he was like, I'm just going to scale Amazon, right? Amazon is making
Right.
so much more money than if he was just like, well, that worked, but I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do something completely different, right? What if he was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to build houses? Actually, I think he does build houses, but that's a whole
He probably does everything,
probably does
honestly.
everything. He has so much money. He probably owns like 10 million companies. So it is what it is.
Yes.
But you understand
Yeah.
the concept.
Absolutely. And one thing that I see pop up a lot, whether it be, I'm in the podcast industry, but I see this in newer businesses too. They might have like a little bit of success, but then they, like you're saying, they don't look at what made them succeed and they do think it's a fluke. I wrote it down somewhere. If you did it before, you can do it again. And
Yes.
that's just what I have to tell myself because I see so many podcasts stop before they need to stop because they're not getting the listens that they expected. If I stopped my podcast because I wasn't, like as successful as maybe these top 10 podcasters, I wouldn't have like half the clients that I have now that I've worked with. I
Hmm.
get a lot of clients from, connections I built through my podcast. But the same is with business. I see a lot of businesses, they think they should do one thing and then all of a sudden they think they should do another and never stick with it for long enough to actually see the results.
Yeah.
And, one thing that I was just thinking about was when I say I can figure something out, that's what I always say. I'm like, I can figure this out. I can figure this out.
Mm.
But sometimes what's coming out of my mouth and what's in my head are not the same, right?
Yeah.
I can be telling you I'll figure it out, but in my head, I'm like, holy shit. So, and I think that's really common,
Mhm.
trying to speak ourselves into this mindset. So, what advice do you have for, calming that inner voice and making it the same as like your confident outer voice?
I would say like the first thing is looking for evidence. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I've asked you in my program and like all my clients, you've seen me ask everybody, like, what's our evidence that this is true? This is like both. I love asking for evidence of the like wrong thing. Like, what's the evidence that there's no clients coming? Because it's kind of
Mm.
like the idea you cannot prove the absence of something, right? It's like we cannot prove that no clients are coming because there's nothing in the world that will confirm that no clients are coming. You may not have a client right now, but you cannot ever, 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 ever say that no clients are coming. There's nothing in the
Yeah.
world that can prove that. There's zero evidence in the world that you can't sign a client tomorrow, that you can't sign a client in a month. There is zero evidence in the world for that. And I love sharing that with my clients because if we then look at the opposite side, how do we know that clients are coming? I know because I gained 2 followers on Instagram today. I know because I released another podcast and 30 people listened to it in the first 48 hours. I did, and you can look for the evidence that more people are becoming aware of my brand. Someone came up to me and recognized me at a networking event and introduced themselves. Like, you can find evidence of the good. You can find evidence that your business is working. You can find evidence that these things are working that you are doing, but you can never find evidence of the negative, of the absence of. And I think that that's so cool too. In order to match, I can figure it out. Pen to paper, write out all the times that you figured it out. You figured out how to register your LLC or your S corp or your sole proprietorship. You figured out how to run your taxes for the first time. It may not have been pretty, but you figured it out. Like,
Yeah.
you figured out how to open a business bank account. You figured out how to use TikTok. You figured out how to use Instagram. Here are all these things that show you I didn't know something. I learned a skill. I now have that skill, right? List out all these
Yeah.
things because your brain needs tangible evidence because it likes to be this devil that feeds you nasty, unproven thoughts. And the only way to beat them is to disprove those thoughts. If you have the thought, I don't know what I'm doing, list out all the times that you knew that you do know what you're doing. Or what is the evidence right now that you do know what you're doing, right? So, for example, Haley, let's say you have the thought of like, I don't know what I'm doing in running a business. The first thing I would tell you, the first thing that I would have you list out would be like, let's look at all the testimonials. Let's look at other people and their excitement when you hand them their finished podcast episode and they're like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, you made me sound like I knew exactly what I was speaking about. You made me sound like this, that, and the other thing. Look at this cover. Look at these show notes. Look at all these descriptors. And you made me sound like X, Y, and Z. And they get so excited. I'm like, look, Haley, you know what you're doing because that person wouldn't be so excited if that wasn't the case. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, list out evidence. Here's client 1, here's client 2, here's client 3. Okay, maybe we don't have clients yet. Let's not use testimonials. Cool, no worries. Your own podcast episode. What's a skill that you have learned? And like, you've done it once, you can do it again. Like, listing out that evidence, showing your brain, I have tangible reason to believe that this is true. And that's like best way to get rid of that disassociation, that overlap of contradicting thoughts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to touch on that just because I feel like it's so common for so many people in business and life and whatever it is. And those contradictory thoughts show up everywhere from time to
Everywhere.
time. So that's a really good way to approach it and kind of talk yourself down out of that spiraling
Yeah.
moment that you might be having.
So true.
I love
And like, it's so easy to get into the spiral and we stop
Mhm.
and have a moment of like, you know what, all these emotions and, business owner, high level exec, like whatever you are, we all have the overwhelm, the stress, the I don't know what I'm doing. And the thing is no one knows what they're doing. All you get to do is decide what you do after you have that thought of no one knows what they're doing because everyone's trying to do their best. Everyone, and I say that for the people who have employees, when people are like, my employee is just not doing well. And I'm like, no one wakes up any day and is like, you know what I want to be? A shitty employee today. No. They're
That's
like, even the people that don't want to be there are like, I don't want to get fired. Like, I'm not going to be a bad employee. I'm going to do my best for what I can today. Right. And that's their best that they can do
Mhm.
today. And so give yourself that benefit of the doubt of like, there is no reason that you need to be 100%. And I say this like with a mirror to my own face. You don't need to be 100% all the time. You don't. You are human and you're going to spiral and you're going to freak out. And there's going to be moments that you're going to be like, I can't figure it out. And then maybe you hire somebody. Maybe you bring someone in that is further along in business in the same field as you or in a similar field. Or maybe it's a business coach, or maybe it's a mental performance coach, or maybe it's a social media manager. Like you get to decide how you want to do it, but no one has everything figured out. Being okay with that. You don't have to be 100% all the time. And hear that. And no
Yeah.
matter how many times we say it to ourselves and we know that it's true, it's such a hard lesson for us, especially as business owners, to listen to. So
Yeah.
hear that for everyone.
I love that. I really love that, and it's just giving ourselves that permission, and honestly, like I mentioned, like, I'm 4.5 years in business, and that's just something I recently started giving myself permission on. I've taken breaks from social media in the past 4.5 years. Of course, if I was posting every single day, I'd drive myself crazy.
Yeah.
So, there's, ebbs and flows in business and life, and, you know, there's just so many like, with the seasons, in summer, sometimes I feel very inspired, and then in the winter, I have more time, but I'm not as inspired, so it's just making sure you know what aligns with you and then having those thoughts to really back it up and beliefs in yourself. I've loved everything that you shared, and like I was saying, those thoughts and, like, the way that we think of ourselves and the actions that we wanna take are so important to business, and so that's really what I've learned a lot in your program, and can you tell us a little bit more about your 6-month coaching retainer?
Yeah, for sure. So I run a 6-month program called the Summit Mentality Program. And we spend 6 months working together, meeting every single week for an hour a week. And we start with just building the basics of understanding, bringing self awareness to your business of what are the limiting beliefs. Something that we talked about literally last week was like, what's the story that we're telling ourselves? If we are telling ourselves the story of, I'm a successful business owner, you're going to live your life as a successful business owner versus I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where my next clients are. Who wants to read that story? No one wants to read the story of the person who doesn't know what they're doing, right? We want to maybe like in the discovery process of it, but they're taking action, they're moving forward. So some mentality program like teaches you how to understand and write your own story and figure out where you want to go and use your logic brain instead of your emotion brain. And that's not to say that emotions don't belong in our life, but there is a time and a place, and we need to learn to calm down, sit with our emotion. And so the 6-month program teaches you all the mental skills to have your brain work for you rather than against you. And then we end with a business retreat. And we spend 3 days in Florida, one, soaking in the sun, getting some sunshine, enjoying the relaxation, but doing it in a very productive way where we are going to be running workshops that will leave you with action items. So that way, at the end of the 6 months, it is fly, little birdie, fly. Like, my goal is you do not need me at the end of 6 months. If you want to continue working with me because you're like, this would be nice, amazing, let's keep going. But I love, and my job, my sole job as a coach is to work myself out of a job. You should not need me at the end of the 6 months. You may want me, you may want to continue working together, but you should not need me. I should leave you. And that is also a sign of a really good coach is at the end of the program with them, did they give you the tools to fly away and do what they taught you to do on your own? And some
Mhm.
coaches do, some mentors do, and others may not. And it's something to be aware of within, the mentorship and coaching world and whatnot, that like that's something that you should go into every program of like, this is my intention is to walk away at the end of this program and be like, I learned a new set of skills and I have them in my toolbox and it's mine. It is my toolbox. It's not their toolbox that you're borrowing from because if they take the tools away, you can't build the car, you can't build the house without their tools. The goal is for you to have your own tools at the end of this. And that business retreat gives you that action item that it is more than just the 6 months, but you are connected to the other women in the group. It is more than just a networking group. It is more than just a coaching program, but you are developing good to great as a person. And business is just one avenue at which we do it.
I love that. And where can people find more information if they want to be a part of one of your next cohorts?
Yeah, I live on Instagram. I love it, love it, love it so much. And it's just True Adventure Co. And True, just like True and False, TRUE Adventure Co. on Instagram. And love Instagram. I hang out there a lot. You can also find me on my website, trueadventurecollective.com. And that's where all the information about the coaching program and what it all entails, when each program starts, how much it is, all that stuff you can apply on my website, and you can find all that information there. And that's where that lives. But if you just want to chat more, understand more, talk about what the hell's performance psychology is, slide into those DMs on Instagram. That is definitely the way to go.
Perfect. And you also have a podcast. What's
I
that
do.
all about?
I do also have a podcast. The podcast manager promoting my own podcast. I appreciate it. My podcast, True Adventure Podcast, we talk about mental performance skills. I teach you bite-sized chunks. All of the episodes that are solo are like honestly about 15 minutes. They're bite-sized chunks of skills to be able to take into your business right now, or they're client interviews, business expert interviews that can help you in your business and take all that and apply it to your business now. That is completely for free. And if you just simply built a business off of listening to that podcast, you can build a very successful business. I will teach you the skills to master your own mind, to master any skill that you want. You don't need a business degree in order to run a successful business. You need to understand how your brain works and how to outsmart your own brain. And that is what I teach you on the True Adventure podcast.
Amazing. Well, I'll put all of those links in the show notes. And Karina, I'd love to end this episode with you sharing 3 action steps for the audience to take this week. So, this is how I end every episode because I want the audience to really take something away and put it into action from our conversation. So, what do you challenge them with this week?
Okay, so I would say like the first thing, let's like make ourselves uncomfortable. Do something that makes you uncomfortable, whether it's showing up in your stories with your face and doing a talking head video. It is going to a store and asking for a discount and you're not sure if they're going to give it to you. It's going and asking for, your meal to be cooked a specific way in a restaurant, and if that's scary to you, do it. If it's not scary to you, find something else. We want something to be scary. And so make yourself uncomfortable this week. That's like one action item. And again, if you're like, I don't know what that looks like, sign in my DMs. I'll give you a couple ideas. I will tell you whenever this podcast airs. And if it's 5 years from now and you listen to this and it's 2029, slide in my DMs. I'll give you ideas. Like I will give you the ideas to get uncomfortable. So get uncomfortable, ask for something. And guess what? The worst thing that people say is no. That's it. That's the worst thing that happens. So that's one action item. Get uncomfortable, ask for something. The second is I encourage you, pen to paper, write down the story that you're telling yourself about your business. Like journaling is so, so helpful. And writing things down makes things so much more real, even if they're the scary thoughts, even if they are I don't want to believe this. Now what? That's okay. And so write out that story that you're telling yourself, and then you can bring awareness, because guess what? You can't fix anything that you don't know is there, right? We need to know that something is there in order to regulate it, in order to fix it, in order to change it. So write out the story that you're telling yourself. That's something that's like, it's simple, it's not easy. And then I would say the third thing is go follow my podcast. Go listen to my podcast. Like action, super easy. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like anywhere that you listen to podcasts, it's there. True Adventure Podcast. Listen to it and start bringing in free mental performance coaching into your life and understand how you can master your own mind. Listen to one episode that sounds like it would be interesting to you. and start there. There is so much good in that already free platform. You don't need to spend money in order to be a master of your own mind. If you want to join the program, join the program. But the action item that is quite literally free is just to listen to the podcast.
I love that. I love those steps. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing everything about mental performance coaching. I know the audience is going to find this really interesting, just as I did the first time I heard about it. And now that I've taken the tools that you're teaching and putting them into practice, like this is a very valuable skill and mindset to have to continue to grow a successful business. So thanks so much, Karina.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so very happy that I'm here and I got to share with everyone all the things. So I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.